Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for attending our webinar this morning. My name is James Norman. I'm also joined here by Nick Warburton from Global Distribution and Aliki Rodgers from Arsenal Football Club. This morning, guys, we're going to be talking about the enterprise file fabric and how it is the killer solution for the media and entertainment industry. So hopefully you can all see our screens, and hopefully you can see us on the webcam as well. The format of this webinar will be a little bit relaxed. We're going to go through some slides, position who we are, what each of our positions are, and what the product is, and we're going to show you a little bit of the enterprise file fabric in action. And Aliki has also kindly volunteered to show us a little bit and talk to us how Arsenal is utilizing the enterprise file fabric in their day-to-day workloads. So without further ado, we shall start. If anybody has any questions throughout the webinar, we do have a questions section as part of this. So please feel free to pop any questions you have. We might pick some up as we go along, and we'll also have a questions section at the end as well. So as I outlined, the three of us are here on the call, and we're going to take a little bit of time just to explore who we are and our positions in our companies. So Nick, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks very much, James. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Warburton. I'm from Global Distribution. I'm director here. Our company was founded in 1995. Primarily, we're involved in the media and entertainment market, although we have focus on enterprise IT, cloud, medical, and surveillance verticals as well, which sort of ties nicely into the enterprise file fabric, as you'll see as the demo goes on, how it applies to many of these different verticals. In terms of operation, we're primarily based in EMEA, headquartered in Cambridge, but we have offices in the US, and we've recently opened an office in Asia Pac. But that's probably a little bit too much for me, because I'm sure you're reasonably familiar. So I'll hand over to James to tell you a little bit more about Storage Made Easy.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so Storage Made Easy, and we've been working with Global Distribution now for a little while. Great partnership between the two organizations. Storage Made Easy as a company is founded in 2009, and we're headquartered just in South London in a place called Sutton. As a product, our primary product is called the Enterprise File Fabric, and the product has over 10 years of proven enterprise maturity. We have it deployed globally, everywhere from Australia to USA, Europe, Asia, and UK, and practically everywhere on the globe, it feels like. We have customers across a broad range of verticals, and that's because the solution solves challenges that are very common across all of those different verticals. We are, of course, here talking about how it solves challenges in the media and entertainment industry today, but of course, similar challenges, similar workloads, similar features and functionality is required in healthcare, finance, government, military, defense, education, retail, and more. So, the topics we talk about, you might feel are very applicable to other sectors you might be working in as well. As a company, we have teams spread across UK, EU, and also the USA. And as a business and people who deploy this, they get our follow the sun support model as well. We're going to take you through a little bit about the product in a little bit, but I'm going to kick over now to Aliki, who's going to introduce himself, hopefully, and Arsenal and a little bit about them.
Morning all, thank you all for joining. I'm Aliki Rodgers, Senior Production Engineer here at Arsenal. Thanks James and Nick for the introduction. So at Arsenal, we obviously, as many of you know, a large established football club in North London. We, as a sort of the media side, we are split across 3 sites where we have infrastructure across all 3. So our stadium, Emirates, Highbury House, which is our offices next door, and our training ground. And we do in the club, as the media department, operate separately from the club in terms of operating our own networks, our own firewalls, our own storage. And this is really where SME for us has come into its own. So we do grow quite heavily as a media team. We're capturing a lot of content, estimate to grow about 10 terabytes a month, 7 to 10 terabytes a month, probably a little bit more at the moment while people are working remotely. Our main storage that SME is addressing is 500 terabytes online system. And we do have a number of studio facilities within our stadium as well, where we deliver our OTT shows. In terms of what we produce, we do a range of content, which is distributed in various means. I think that our long form content, which is known as the international program block, which is where we distribute a 4-hour set of content that we produce in-house each week, which could include match coverage or our magazine shows, and these are delivered over satellite. We also do a lot of the social media output, as you probably see, as well as match highlights and live offerings on match days, such as our OTT show on our website, and we've also started doing bits and pieces on Twitch. That's probably a little summary from myself on what we do at Arsenal.
Thanks, Aliki, and I think, as you would agree, the biggest club in North London, right?
Always.
So it's great to have you on board today, Aliki. We really appreciate your time today. And as I mentioned earlier, hopefully we can lean on you as we go through this webinar. Perhaps you can explain to us, how you guys use the file fabric, and we can talk about certain features and functions as we go through.
Absolutely.
So just to set the scene a little bit, firstly, I just want to cover off, some slides and give a little bit of a background. And firstly, I want to start by talking about what are the traditional problems that, that are particularly in the media industry that our customers and users are facing on a day-to-day basis. Firstly, one of the biggest challenges, we see and we hear from customers is a vast array of storage platforms that people are using. Whether that's, as Aliki was talking about, his online storage, his LTO tape archives, maybe cloud storage, maybe enterprise storage. Everyone's got a vast array of storage platforms these days. Some on-prem, some on cloud, some are perhaps hybrid as well. So being able to consolidate those into, a single namespace or a single view, a single access layer is very difficult and often puts a lot of onerous responsibility perhaps on end users to be able to move things between the layers, move things around, as an example. So being able to consolidate into a single namespace is one of the big challenges we see. Secondly, we also see challenges around things like MAMs and people not necessarily wanting to be locked in to a big fully featured MAM type product that maybe locks them into certain formats, certain behaviors, and also a cost model that can be particularly prohibitive as well. Thirdly, we want to look at things like productivity tooling, being able to accelerate, workloads, accelerate what people are doing day to day as they work with a platform. So Aliki, I know you guys, you produce a lot of content, particularly at the end of a match, as an example. I'm sure you guys face challenges about trying to get, footage from a half or a full game, out to your distribution partners, about to your online stores. Being able to move files around in an accelerated fashion is really important for a lot of our customers. And likewise, no system in these kind of scenarios is also really complete without integration into other systems as well. We have to understand that, a solution like the Enterprise File Fabric is generally not the only tool that customers are using in the market. You might have a lightweight MAM, you might have a transcoder, you might have other solutions and services you have in place. And of course, you want a solution that fits into the ecosystem that you have already in place as well. So what is the essential value proposition of the Enterprise File Fabric when we talk about the value in the media industry? Well, this slide really hopefully summarizes it really succinctly. What the product does is we take your different data silos, whether those are maybe file archives you have maybe on premise, whether those are cloud-based storage platforms, whether those are maybe deep, cold, Glacier type storage platforms in the cloud or on premise, whether those are what you might call enterprise SaaS type storage offerings like your Dropboxes and your Box and your OneDrives. We take all of those different data silos that a customer has and we bring those into one place. We're not going to move the data around. Your choice of storage is down to you. So, whatever your workloads are, whatever your behaviors are, your data stays where you need it to stay. But we can accommodate all of those different storage platforms essentially into a single namespace using our data index that we've done in place. Take that data, we present it as a single pane of glass back to you from a management and from a user's point of view as well. We can then layer functionality now on top of that single namespace, giving you essentially a file fabric repository of your data, where of course you can do things like searching for content, accelerating data transfers from your desktop to your storage, or perhaps between different storage platforms. We can also help you to share data, whether we're talking about content acquisition or content distribution. We can help with those types of use cases we see. Whether you want to tier data off to a colder, cheaper storage, as an example, moving data into, from your online archives maybe into a Glacier-like type platform, as an example. Or whether you want to layer and protect what you have with additional security and governance controls, so you can make sure that people not only have the tools they need to do their jobs effectively, but they're also doing it in a secure and compliant way with the way that the organization wants them to work. Just to briefly look at a few use cases then, that we typically see covering those particular points. So obviously, the single asset namespace, is one of these pieces I just touched on, combining those different storage platforms, whether they're tier 1, tier 2, 3, or 4, we can index those and we can then provide end user access to that data. You can also assign things like roles and permissions to that data as well. So leveraging, the ability to look at both storage permissions and also overlaying permissions through the enterprise file fabric as well. That essentially gives you, a universal file system. So you can access your OneDrive the same way you can access your on-prem SMB filer server, as an example. It doesn't matter what type of storage platform is, we're making that agnostic for the end users. So Aliki, as an example here, and I know you may be going to walk us through some of this when we go through the demo, you guys have been heavily utilizing things like the single namespace, the universal file system, right?
Absolutely, yeah, it's been a game changer for us, and I'd say SME now probably underpins everything that we do in terms of file movement, and whether it's integration with our say media asset management systems, or purely users sharing files, or even collaborative work moving files into shared folders with third parties. So there's quite a range of what we end up using SME for, but I would find it touches on everything that we do in terms of file movement.
Yeah, and it's the real underpinning to the product as well. Once you have that single viewpoint, you can then layer that functionality on top to, for sharing, collaboration, productivity, and more. It's really kind of, the basis level. But when people see it, actually I can do my S3 alongside my filer in the office. And hey, you can access this on your mobile, and you can access this on your desktop client inside or out of the office. And you're not punished in any particular direction for doing it in the office or out of the office, unlike, maybe traditional storage platforms as well, right? So that's a key use case, and something we'll be covering when we go through the demo as well. The second is search. It's very, very common again for organizations both in the media space and outside of the media space to have hundreds and thousands and millions of pieces of unstructured data that is just hanging around, maybe not correctly categorized, ordered, sorted, grouped into particular folders. It's very common when we deal with sort of end user file spaces. Now, I know, Aliki, you guys run a pretty tight ship over there in terms of how you organize your content, but it does happen, right? We have content sprawl pretty much everywhere. So one of the powerful features here of the file fabric we'll be showing you is how we can index that data, and then we can also search across that data as well, pulling back relevant files wherever they are on the storage platform, whether they're on S3, whether they're on our file system, whether they're on Cloudian, or whether they're on Dropbox. It doesn't matter. We can index those data points and give you that single search. Again, something you can't necessarily leverage from your typical Windows or Mac based Finder search, as an example. Thirdly, we'll be talking a little bit about content acquisition and content distribution. Aliki, I know again this is a really, really hot topic for you guys, but the ability for particularly in the media space to acquire content from people. So, being able to set up a folder where you can deliver some content to you. Maybe you're working with contractors, maybe you're working with people who can be delivering you content, your customers, as an example. Sometimes you want to receive assets from them. You want to be able to do that from anywhere. You also don't want to be tied into any particular storage platform either. And likewise, you don't want to be going off to buy additional storage capacity from other vendors in order to just service that use case. Solution can leverage, what storage you already have. We can also talk about content distribution as well, taking what you have produced and then being able to deliver that out to your external collaborators, from in place where you are, and distribute that out immediately with protections, with security controls, and in a way that is compliant. And of course, underpinning all of that is, as I mentioned before, our acceleration, being able to do that in an accelerated fashion. You might have heard of tools like Signian and Aspera, but this works directly within the product with no browser extensions, plugins, or anything like that needed. So you can drag and drop in and distribute your content out quickly and easily. Now, Aliki, I know we'll certainly touch on that as we go through the demo, but this has been a pretty fundamental feature for you guys in your file fabric usage, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I'd say even more so during lockdown, while people were working from home, which you can't always guarantee connectivity speeds, especially when you're moving fairly large files around. It makes a huge difference. I mean, for example, our camera guys working on match days at remote stadiums, you can't at all guarantee the Wi-Fi conditions, and having MStream to any extra minutes can really allow you to capture any more bits and pieces. So any time we can save our camera operators is massive.
Absolutely. And finally, the last use case I'm going to focus on here, so we can spend most of our time in the demo, will be actually around sort of retaining content, tiering it, and also providing an automation layer over the top of that as well. As I've been touching on, we provide the ability to connect into all these different storage platforms, whether they're, maybe sort of fast, SSD-based storage platforms built for editing workstations, whether it's a colder, Glacier type storage platform, that doesn't matter to the product. We can provide ways to have your data in the platform, then move it out to colder platforms, saving you money over time. Aliki, I'm sure, with your tape archives, that's not only for your backup purposes as well, but that's also primarily as well to save cost on your hot storage as well, right? So, so being able to move data around the place to different storage platforms is key to a lot of our customers. And finally as well, touching here around being able to automate actions. Again, every media shop that I've ever spoken to, and Nick, and you can probably concur with this as well, everyone has their own custom workflows, their own integrations, their own ways of doing things. And sometimes that's held together by duct tape, sometimes that's held together by actual, processes and tools and software to actually do some of this. And so the ability to have APIs that you can easily call and execute to move data from one to the other, to share data, to collaborate, to drive productivity in your teams. The ability to have what we call in our system data automation rules as well. When files land into folders, do we want to go and transcode it, as an example? These open APIs and automation rules are again key to building these modern workflows that people are using here. And again, Aliki, I'm sure, as we'll touch on in the demo, you guys are pretty heavy users of some of that automation, right, to tie this into external systems. So that's just really a background really on sort of 4 of the key hot use cases that we typically see in the media space, and obviously where the file fabric sits very well within those use cases. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flick over to a bit of a demonstration. We're going to take you through how these work, and we're going to lean on Aliki, if he doesn't mind, to also show us really how this looks in the real world as well. It's all good taking it from me, but let's actually see it with Aliki. So let me just switch my screen.
Thanks, James. Bear with me a moment and I'll get my screen sharing going.
Right. Just a quick reminder while these guys are getting ready for the demos, we've had a couple of questions in already, but please do keep your drop us some questions in and we'll get round to answering them at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Nick. So I'll start here actually, Aliki, and then I'll hand over to you. So first of all, hopefully you guys can see the login screen of my File Fabric appliance now. Do you see my new screen, Nick?
Yeah, I've got you.
Sorry, yes, absolutely. Sorry. But yeah, no, absolutely. You're good to go, James.
Excellent, great. So first of all, a bit of background. The Enterprise File Fabric is a purely virtual solution, okay? And it's something you can either choose to deploy on-premise inside of your own data center, or it's something you can choose to deploy in the public cloud. Aliki, I know from you guys choose to deploy this on premise, but of course, if you ever needed to, you could also deploy it into platforms like AWS or in Azure or GCP and many others as well. It's a fully customizable solution, so you can brand it top to bottom, logos, color schemes, what the appliance is called. Is it branded up as Arsenal? Does it look like Storage Made Easy? You can choose how you want to brand and skin the appliance as well, and it is a multi-tenant system as well out of the box, meaning you can potentially run multiple different organizations on a single deployment as well. Of course, media customers, lots of data, lots of scale. So as customers use it and expand the number of users, the number of data that they have, of course the solution can be scaled out as well. So starting off here, I've already got a tenant provisioned on our system here, and I'm going to log straight in to my system here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go straight through to our actual dashboard. So our dashboard in our solution here gives us the overview of the different storage platforms we have plugged in to our enterprise file fabric. In my case here, I've got a mixture of sort of NAS, SMB, and also cloud-based S3 storage, in this case, Amazon S3. So I've got a mixture of different storage types, some object storage, some file storage. And that's pretty common for what we see in the media space with customers. Always got some element of file storage, more and more so also an additional element of, say, object storage, particularly for maybe the archives that they want to keep of their data as well. The solution is able to connect to over 60 different data sources. So whether it's Backblaze, Box, Cloudian, OneDrive, whatever it is, we can connect into a whole variety of different storage platforms that you want to provide, that you want to provide your end users with access to. So Aliki, maybe a question for you, if it's okay at this point. What sort of storage platforms does Arsenal connect their file fabric into?
Because it's quite a wide range that we use. So we have our own internal storage, which is mounted on SMB. We also have our AWS buckets on there, as well as a number of third-party platforms that are integrated, majority of which are FTP clients. So say, for instance, moving content up to our website, it's moving up to our video provider's FTP, which then gets picked up and sent onto our website. So there is quite a diverse use of various FTPs to move content to third parties.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got a good variety, and I guess some of those, I think, as you're maybe alluding to there, some of those are your storage, perhaps on premise. Some of those are some provided by your vendors as well.
Exactly that. So it is a combination of both ourselves sharing our own storage, which may be for third parties to connect to and move stuff up to us, as well as our own users using it, as well as then content distribution. So plugging in FTPs to some publication companies for printing of our match day programs, and as I alluded to, sort of moving content up to our website are probably the two most used third-party FTPs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So it's a really good way to not only have that single pane of glass, not only for users, but also as you plug in external vendors and workflows, to have those services integrated as well at the same time. So with our dashboard here, of course, we see some overall data about how much data we've got here. We could monitor this. We also have, auditing capabilities around this as well, so you can track, what people are doing on these different storage platforms on a day-to-day basis as well. And so, we can see some overall information. As I showed, we have a wizard-based interface for adding different storage connectors, and it's easy to connect new ones and plug in as we go. I am in here as the admin right now, so I will be showing a bit more of an elevated view of the system. But just to illustrate that point about the single pane of glass, I'm just going to head over to our file manager here, because obviously the file manager is where our users will spend most of our time. Looking at the root of our tree here, again, this is what we illustrate as being that single pane of glass. Typically, if you had some data sitting on the SMB shares, in the past, we would be hunting off to our file explorer on Mac or Windows or Linux. If you had some data in Dropbox, we might be going off to the Dropbox website. If you had some data in S3, you might be using, a sort of an S3 client on your desktop, or you might be using the S3 console in the browser. you have all of these different places where you have to keep track. So now with the file fabric in place, managing this single pane of glass, we can see these different disparate storage platforms in one place with one consistent interface. What's nice about this as well is, of course, with this type of access, everything's just files and folders. It doesn't matter whether it's object storage, like this is on Amazon S3 as an example. It doesn't matter whether it's a filer, sitting on premise. So Aliki, this would be just like, your online archive in the offices. Doesn't matter what it is, we treat it the same and users see it as the same. And so that really helps to make the storage agnostic as well from the end user's point of view. The users don't necessarily have to worry or concern themselves that this is object storage on the back end or file storage. This is just storage that they have access to now. I've touched on a little bit here about, as I flick through different folders, how this is a file manager. Now, the file fabric actually provides many different interfaces for what users might choose to use. Whether you want to have your users accessing through a web browser, like this one here, where we can access our web file manager really easily, whether you want to have desktop access to this storage as well, again, the solution can provide that on Mac, Windows, Linux. So as an example here, we have a network drive on our Windows machine here. So we can access that same storage, access those same files that we're viewing in the other folder, open them up, preview, share, collaborate, whatever you want to do. We've got many different ways of accessing this. And of course, you've got mobile access as well. So if you do have roaming users working on iPads or Android devices or iPhones as an example, you can easily provision access to those through the mobile device access as well. So however you want your users to access, we've got a nice way of providing access to them. And of course, these will work really well both in and out of the office. Now, that's been a key topic for a lot of our customers as well over the past 2 years. How does this solution work in and out of the office? So rather than hear it from me, Aliki, what's your guys' experience with working with the file fabric in and out of the office? Obviously, you guys, I think, came on board in 2019, so before the pandemic. But obviously, you've been using the solution through the pandemic when you've been in the office, out of the office. How has it been for you? Has it been flexible for you guys?
Massively. I mean, I think you touched on it earlier, where it is the point of it being a single pane of glass. There's no longer the requirement for our users to jump between various FTP platforms, to understand various protocols, to move files, say using the command line as you're accessing various platforms. Having everything centralized has allowed the user to do things far more autonomously. From a support perspective, we have a very small operations team, and that's been a massive help from us in not having to explain how to set up some complicated file sharing to get between various platforms. As you alluded to, everyone can see everything. It all just looks like files and folders, which is a fairly standard way of viewing content that I'm sure everyone will be able to get their heads around, as well as transferring the content between your various places. It's seamless, and the user has no concept that they're moving things from, say, object to online storage to an object-based storage in the cloud. From their point of view, it is purely file-based, which is, I think, compared to a lot of the platforms that we use, SMEs probably had to have the least amount of training time to get on board with, as it is fairly intuitive. If you've ever used a file browser before, it's very easy to get your head around how SME functions.
Yeah, and of course, with that remote working, when everyone was out of the office, in the office as well, I think your solution and others, have the flexibility to deploy it in a way where you don't necessarily need to have a VPN to access as well, right? So as you send your numbers of editors home, of course, we found with a lot of customers that things like VPNs weren't scaling very well, obviously expensive to scale those. And so, you can find ways to secure your on-prem assets, but provide ways of access outside of the office on home-grade network connections where people, still are, frankly, and probably will continue to be now. So you have to have a solution, like I said, that works for both in and out of the office. One of the areas we often talk about, and I touched there in our slide, was about acceleration. How do we move files around, and how do we make people productive with the files and the assets they're working with? Taking a pretty bad example, that we see, it's very common for media guys to be working with large video assets. Aliki, I think your sort of pretty standard bitrate is about a gig a minute. Is that right?
Yeah, so as a standard, we use ProRes 42 for our sort of mezzanine file formats. So again, say a gig a minute. For match halves, you're looking at just over 50 gig per half, which is very large file sizes for people who are working on public internet at home. I think it was a combination of probably some digital duct tape and the fact that SME's file acceleration has enabled us to work through the pandemic with our editors at home. We actually used SME in conjunction with another browser-based clipping platform, which allowed our users to view and trim some of the very large files that we hold on premise. So say an editor who wants to make a highlight clip of all the goals from the last match, instead of downloading the entire match half, they're able to clip out the rough sections that they want to, push those exports directly to their own folder on SME, and download the far more palatable size while still being in high res with maintaining the audio structure to then edit locally and then upload via SME as well in order to ingest to our other platforms. So it really has been under the hood of almost all of our productions during lockdown, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think, as you were sort of alluding on there, some of that acceleration that you see through the file fabric is provided by something that we call in the product MStream. And MStream is the file transfer acceleration that we provide into the file fabric. It works, you don't necessarily have to have any browser plugins or extensions to make it work. And it works simply by, as drag and drop as the most basic example. So if I start here with it's just under a gig, this MP4 file, I'm going to upload this from my home up to the storage. You see those 4 green arrows are indicating how fast this file is transferring up to the storage. And so you can see that's pretty much maxing out my network connection. And now that file has landed on our storage platform. So I'm working from home, that's back in the office, and now we've been able to move that file up just under a gig in under a minute. So we're able to move these files up to the storage in an accelerated fashion. And of course, like any video file, we could preview and play back this file directly in our browser, streaming it directly from the source at this point. So we don't need to download it back to our desktop. And of course, like any video asset you'd expect, you can also scrub through these videos, play back certain portions as well. What's also quite common as well, when we've got these types of video assets in play as well, is, being able to play back formats that you can't necessarily play back as well. Often, there might be maybe some staff who maybe aren't media trained but need to look at media assets. They're not familiar with what ProRes formats are. Maybe they don't have VLC player or QuickTime on their machine, as an example. So, with the file fabric, we provide also nice ways to play back video formats that maybe necessarily they wouldn't ordinarily be able to play back. So to give you an example here, I'm playing back a ProRes MXF file here, just over a gig file, and you can see that streaming back directly in my browser. That's using our new web streamer technology to stream that back through the browser. So we can serve previews, playbacks of all these different file formats, whether they're ProRes, MXFs, whether they are MOVs, whether they're just simple MP4s as an example. And of course, we also provide transcoding capabilities through the product as well to convert formats if you need that as well into a sort of a sidecar file. Additionally, in terms of our MStream, you saw me take this file up. We can also now move this file across to different storage platforms as well. And because we present that single pane of glass, it's as simple as drag and drop. I'm just going to copy it over to our S3, and this is going to copy using MStream, which we can monitor here on our tasks. And you can see how quickly that transferred from our NAS over to our S3 storage. And now we could potentially have an S3 lifecycle rule that's going to maybe auto-glacier that file after a period of time as well. So easy to move files up, around, and also back down to our desktops as well. As we work with content on different storage platforms, and I'm going to stick with S3 here, we're going to talk about sharing. And I'm actually going to lean on Aliki a little bit here in just a second as we talk about how we share files. So if I wanted to take an example of this media folder that we just moved some content in, we can provide different ways to share the content. if we're working inside of Microsoft Teams, as an example, we can create a shared folder for Teams. If we're working inside of, we just want to share a link to Aliki, we can easily just share a URL link. We've got many different ways to facilitate sharing. So what I'm going to do in this scenario is I'm going to say, I'm going to share this folder by URL. I can nominate who I'm going to share it to. I can restrict it. My organization says I've got to have a password on it. And I'm going to allow my recipients to also put files into that folder as well. And I'm going to generate the shared link for that. Let me open up in a shared window. So as we come to talk about content acquisition and content distribution, this is a key topic. How do we acquire and how do we distribute content? So imagine I've sent this to someone outside of my organization. Maybe it's a contractor. They can now access the files in this folder. So we've been able to share a file from our storage that's on-prem or in S3 in this case, and we've been able to share that with someone externally. They get a restricted view. They only get to access that file and its folders and whatever else we've decided to share. We can share both files and folders. So they could now see and preview this asset if they wanted to. They could also upload into this folder if they wanted to, because we also allowed uploads in here as well. So likewise, as we were just showing, that acceleration also works in here. So if I wanted to take a match play footage, drag and drop that in, again, that transfer going up to S3 is also going to utilize our MStream transfer acceleration. And so we can not only send and we can receive files, we're doing this on our own storage in our own control. So Aliki, I know maybe you had something to show us here at this point. Why don't you walk us through how you guys sort of use that sharing and how that fits in with your workflows, if that's okay?
Absolutely. Bear with me a moment.
Let me make you a presenter.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just checking everyone can see my screen all okay.
Yeah, we can.
Cool. So here's our SME platform. So as James showed in your dashboard, this is sort of our live dashboard showing all the various providers that we have connected. So we have a range from our Amazon S3 bucket. We have our SMB connected to our main online storage, which is the bigger 500 terabytes nearline storage for editing off, as well as a number of third-party FTP sites. So say, for instance, StreamMG here is actually pushing files up to our website for publishing. Now, the way that we do use SME for a variety of use cases and for a variety of users. I'd say internal staff probably use SME to share files externally. The majority of the time would be on SME's platform itself, but we do have a few clever integrations with other platforms, such as our media asset managers, that use SME under the hood to share content. So to give you an idea, we have a very, very, very large amount of files and folders that are being shared. Obviously, I'm an admin on here, so I'm seeing a wholesome view of the entire of our content. Now, in terms of moving content and what our users would do, a lot of the time they are purely uploading to one of their user file folders. So if I find my own folder here, would be moving content into their own user folders. All of these are viewable in the office on our network through SMB mounts as well. So it's quite flexible between whether you're working remotely, it's all seamless, you're all working with the same folders. So people would quite easily come in, share some content externally, and be able to, as James showed, fill in a quick, simple form to share the content. We do mandate a few things like having passwords and an audit trail. I think one thing that really SME changed for us was both acquisition of content and distribution of content. Previously, when using, say, for instance, something like WeTransfer, it's very difficult to have an audit trail of what's being shared, where it's shared, and whether a link is still active. SME's given us a lot of oversight, allowed us to have closed links. So for instance, making sure links expire after a certain amount of days to protect our content, as well as being able to see who's shared links, where they've been gone to and how many times they've been downloaded. Obviously, security of our content is fairly critical, and being able to use those is a really, really useful tool. Now, in terms of integrations, we have a sort of a distribution of content platform, which is Dalet Flex. Now, our users probably use Flex directly more than they're coming onto the Storage Made Easy website. However, little do they know, under the hood, SME is doing all of the heavy lifting here. So say, for instance, Flex, which I'm doing at the moment, is where we can come on and see our finished assets. I'm just in a demo section at the moment, so it'll just be some basic thing, fairly standard media asset management. I can see the content, I can view files, and I can run workflows against them. Now, if I look at some of our pre-built wizards and I say use the share file one, a fairly familiar form will pop up despite it not being branded with SME. This is actually the exact same form that we were seeing sharing the content on SME itself. So our users from Flex, without knowing it, are actually sharing with exactly the same options using SME. So I'd fill this in. Under the hood, when I trigger this workflow off, under the hood, Flex will go off, use an API call to SME to move the file and share it using SME's file sharing. Now, we do that with several other of our wizards as well that we've integrated and automated here. Say, for instance, sharing content to our website. We'll use SME to move the file up to the FTP. So this platform Flex actually has no knowledge of that FTP storage. And despite our users coming in on here, SME is what's doing all the heavy lifting under the hood. The same goes with moving files to, say, our China team, moving files to, say, our virtual studio, which runs OBS. All of this has allowed our users to come in without really needing to do much more other than fill in a form to say, provide a file a name, and the file move will be done by SME under the hood. We'll also get fairly tangible feedback on what's occurring on SME under the hood. So if I viewed our dashboard here of workflows, we'll be able to see, so say for instance, here's something someone shared earlier on. It's using SME as the shared link. If I very quickly take a look at this, we'll be able to see the call action. Apologies if this is going a little bit too much under the hood, but for those of you who do your own dev work, this may be useful. So these are workflows that we built ourselves. It's very granular and step-based. And as you can see, we're calling out to SME using its very, very open APIs, which is something that we're really, really pleased that we're able to access all the APIs and be able to configure and deploy workflows like this ourselves without too much external support. So this file share is actually coming in, following through all the nodes, depending on the variables the users put in, calling out to SME, returning a file successful, for instance, and sending an email over to the user to say, your file is ready and here's the shared file link. That's probably the most common workflows that we're using at the moment, where SME is doing things underneath the hood and not necessarily with the visibility of our users. The other parts that we do is probably more on acquisition of content. So we, you may have seen this on YouTube. Apologies, my screen is frozen from my laptop. We do a series on YouTube called Gooners React, which is similar to a Gogglebox concept where fans are filming themselves at home, watching the game, which will then clip up all of those and put out as kind of a watch-along video. Now, those users are all sending us their content via an SME link. So we create them a user, they've got limited access to a certain folder, they're able to log in from home, whether it's directly on their iPad using the app or straight through a website, depending on their sort of level of tech. Despite the idea that maybe something like storage made easy would be something that engineers or people who work in media would get used to, we've had very, very little complication from third parties who may not be the most tech savvy users using SME to send us content. And I think that's a real testament to how intuitive the platform is. In terms of other bits that we do under the hood, we team view it into our LTO archive. So we run a Zendata LTO archive where we have a series of pairs of tapes. Now, prior to lockdown, when we were working in the office, it was fairly easy for us to access content on our LTO archive, as it was all integrated with our production asset manager, which sits in front of Flex for distributing content. However, moving remotely, we lost some of the functionality of being able to recall content from our tapes. However, instead of having to jump on the command line, SSH in, move content around, which is fairly clunky and not easy for everyone to do, being able to jump onto our tape archives resident machine that hosts the software, recall files directly from the Finder windows and drop them straight into wherever you'd like them to go. Say, for instance, sharing content out to our publishing company is seamless, really, really quick, doesn't require anyone to jump on site and use heavy machines. And again, alluding back to the fact that we have a very, very small operations team. Effectively, there's 3 of us who manage our media infrastructure. Having remote access to all of our storage. I can access it wherever I want and be able to say provide, hand out, or restrict access from any device is really a game changer for us. There's not too much else that I was going to think about sharing on here, but James, if you did have any specific questions on bits and pieces, or if there's any questions coming in, please do shout.
That's a really valuable overview there, Aliki. And there is actually one question I see from earlier on that's actually very applicable to what you just said here, which was, and I think you kind of answered it, which is, how much of the file movement that goes on in Arsenal between different storage silos is automated by some process. And I think your answer was actually quite a fair bit of it there, right? And it's all driven a lot maybe through your MAM, where your users are doing some operations. But I guess, as you also alluded to, you're doing a lot manually as well, where people need to move things around.
Exactly, and I suppose the other part that's quite interesting is we used, this probably took a little bit of tweaking along with your support, which was really, really quick to get to the bottom of. So we ingest content from our camera operators and raw files into a separate production asset manager that sits ahead of all of these. Now, normally that would involve either using a VPN to mount drives on our network in order to access the watch folders where content will be picked up. However, moving remotely, everyone not able to connect via VPNs, slow internet speeds. And when you're moving up very large camera files, we opened up these watch folders, which are down here. Apologies, my screen is running very slow with the share screen at the moment. This allowed our camera ops to upload very, very large files into these watch folders while working remotely, allowing our editors to pick up the source content. Now, sometimes these may be 300, 400, 500 gig batch uploads. So we did find that sometimes people were doing this overnight. Provided your laptop screen isn't set to lock, those have been flawless for us. We've had very, very few cases of, say, long 4 or 5 hour uploads running into any issues. So this is another means that we're bringing content that comes in. So if I uploaded a file, say, into one of these watch folders, SME would do MStream upload. At that point, our other media asset manager will be scanning these folders, picking up the content, ingesting it, and depending on which folder it's been put into, tagged appropriately and added to the relevant collection for our editors to pick up. So it really it shows again that SME is very much the conduit for almost all of our production. And there's very little that doesn't touch upon SME in some capacity.
Just one question, Aliki, just while James is bringing up his screen. It's something that we talked about a little bit in preparation for this call was, I know you said at the start of the call that mainly SME, enterprise file fabrics used for the media department, which kind of runs in a separate network. But when we had chat leading up to the call, you were talking about how it's used across other areas of the business. I don't know whether you just wanted to have a quick chat about that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so we deployed SME initially as sort of for the media team to cater for our sort of distribution needs. It quickly became apparent that other file sharing facilities were not necessarily providing the same level of functionality and robustness as SME. And this was noticed by some other departments within our club, say, for instance, our football department, as well as some of the partnerships team. Now, they have also been added onto our SME network and are using some of their own storage that we do manage and are still the administrators. But it has now touched on a wider part of the club, and I think it's something that's only going to grow as we move forward.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen again. So really kind of the last part, that I kind of wanted to touch on here, and we mentioned in our slides at the start, was really the powerful search that you get off the back with the file fabric as well. You saw me moving some files around just a minute ago with, so our Big Buck Bunny, just as a contrived example. But of course, as I mentioned before at the start, you'd be going to different places to do different searches, you get different controls, and there's just no consistency between them. So with that single pane of glass and all that metadata that we have about the files, we can then drive an incredibly powerful search. So if I wanted to search for, Buck, I can see all the places now where I'm keeping Big Buck Bunny. Now you guys can see I do probably a few too many demos here with the old Big Buck Bunny, but this really comes to illustrate how many places we could potentially be having this file. This can help in a variety of ways. Trying to find the file you're after. It could also help if you're trying to reduce, storage usage. If you've got from some very large files, you want to see where it is across the estate. And of course, from these files, we can, preview, see them back, play them back here in real time as well. And of course, if we wanted to then also, filter down these search results into more accurate ones, we can also utilize some of our additional metadata mining that we can do on files to do things like, I want to find all the big bug bunnies that are ProRes, as an example. I want to find all the big bug bunnies that are under 1 minute in duration, as an example. So we can really filter and tune these search results. And of course, when we've got something we really want to get back to, we can, of course, open that in the containing folder and see where that is sitting on our storage. So easy to find that content. Like I said, we can search in both the file name and also the file contents. Of course, if you've got things like Word documents as well, or typical Office docs, we can also look in those contents and pull back, words and text from that as well using our search engine. And finally, as Aliki was sort of talking about there, we do have a full API and set of automation rules. I see there's a question in there. The API we make completely open for our customers. Arsenal, a great example of people who have taken that and gone the extra mile with it. So building, all the different actions you might want to do, moving files, renaming files, uploading files, searching for files, whatever you want to do, you can build that in through our APIs here, power your additional workloads and whatever else you want to be doing with the file fabric in the greater scheme of things. Of course, we also have what we call the automation rules outside of that as well for building, rules in through the product as well. So where we can say, well, if a file's discovered on the storage, we could send it off for transcoding. We could say we could move it over here, we could move it over there. You've got different rules and automation rules that you can build and flesh out through the system as well. Obviously, as a basis across all of this, you've got things like single sign-on integration, whether that's through like a SAML, like Azure Active Directory, Okta, OneLogging, Ping Identity. We've also got traditional Active Directory integrations as well, full auditing, compliance, policy engines, everything that you'd need from a security and compliance is also covered here. We've not spent too much time because I want to focus in this demo purely on what this is about for the media space. And so finally, to sort of wrap up, perhaps before we get back to some of our questions at the end, really from really just a summary point of view, you've seen and heard, from myself and from Aliki, how the solution becomes the central hub to the organization's workloads. Whether that's the single namespace, whether that's the accelerated transferring, whether that's the playback options, whether that's the ability to ingest and outgest data between different storage platforms, integrations into other workloads that people might be doing, how this gets into platforms like Avid, how you can use this in Premiere, how you can push your data out to playout services, as an example. So all of this, as you can see, there's quite a lot there, how it becomes the central hub within the organization. And, I think Aliki and Arsenal are testament to that. So Aliki, I really thank you for sharing a lot of your experience there with the product. So Nick, perhaps we should at this point have a look at some of the questions. And I see one or two here on the top of my pile here. So the one here for you, Aliki. So how do you see the storage technology that you're using adapting over time, and how do you see the file fabric playing into that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think at the moment we're very much in the case of hybrid storage, where we're using a combination of legacy tape archives. We're using our nearline online storage for edit speeds, as well as some cloud storage, which is the majority of which is for distribution. We are currently exploring looking at producing in the cloud, whether that's spinning up EC2 edit suites, which will then be accessing our storage. I think the agnostic nature of SME able to connect to any type of storage means that it will cater for any of our expansion going forward. I think in terms of archiving content, we still do stay on LTO tape, as over the long term, at the moment, we do find that it is cheaper. You're not paying the ongoing storage costs. That is definitely going to change in the near future. I'm in no doubt that cloud storage is going to be in cloud producing, and that also requires the kind of the infrastructure around that to support it. So public internet to allow people to actually access these platforms from home at a sufficient speed. So it's definitely an ongoing environment, and then that's something that I can't see SME not being part of how we're growing in the future, just because it can connect all of these different parts without any kind of any issues or any extra configuration, at least that we've come across so far.
Oh, that's great to hear. Okay, so I see another question in here about, how is the solution viable for large collections of assets? Now, I know, Aliki, from your point of view, you're probably not in the in terms of the numbers of files, but you certainly got a large volume of files. So in terms of how the file fabric can cope with that, the solution actually itself doesn't necessarily worry itself about the size of files. It doesn't matter whether it's a 1 gig file, a 10 gig file, or a 1 terabyte sized file that a customer's moving around or playing with in the system. Actually, from a file fabric point of view, it's actually the number of files that customers have. And so, we typically see customers running in the millions of files, but actually, to be honest with you, we have other customers running in the billions of files. Some customers running with 3 to 4 billion files, who are maybe not in the media space, but dealing with things like genome sequence files and things like that as well. So in answer to that question, of course, it can scale both from a file sizing point of view, but also the quantity of files that you have as well. I see another question about file share download links and pre-signed URL. So I presume the question is more about, if people are using S3. We do actually provide, 2 ways to do that. We can have what we call, we can generate pre-signed URLs, and we also can facilitate what we call direct download as well through the solution. So if customer is using S3, that's something we worked a little bit closely together on, Aliki, I think, as well, with some of your use cases. If customer is using a platform like S3 and wants to facilitate or use the benefits of things like direct download from an S3 target, then of course the file fabric can use what you might call pre-signed URLs in that flow. I see some questions about automation rules. We covered a little bit about that. And if we connected all of our storage, I have concerns about preventing unauthorized access. What controls does it provide? Well, I think as Aliki was showing there's a lot of, you can set up permissions and directories where people can collaborate. By default, the file fabric doesn't show the whole storage to everyone. People have to be given access to, team drives, just like you would on a typical Windows filer. We support sort of NTFS-like permissions, so you can set them up and provide access to Aliki and Nick, and so they can collaborate in a folder together. So we've got good ways of managing permissions in there.
I was supposed to briefly add on that is that the permissions are extremely granular and to allow us to really narrow in on what someone's able to do, whether that's purely to view a folder, to download only from a folder, so they not have delete or move permissions. So it is granular enough to allow you to really lock down your system. And I think that the other bit on that probably goes hand in hand is the audit trail. There is an audit trail of everything every user does on the platform, and that can be really useful to find out where something was sent by mistake to someone, why a file didn't appear, as well as having security connotations.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, have you got any further questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of smaller incidental ones. There's a couple of eagle-eyed viewers spotted the difference between James's SME interface and Aliki's. So the question is around branding, and is that kind of standard within the is that standard within the package?
Yeah, that is standard within the solution. Yeah, it's very easily brandable. There's a GUI where you can go in and customize colors. There's basic stuff you can do: colors, logos, name of the system, so you can easily fit it in. And of course, there's ways if you know how to take it further as well. With style sheets and things like that, you can really take it to town.
Cool. And then one other question here was around you were talking about Aspera, and Aliki was talking about sort of accelerated file delivery. And one of the questions you mentioned Aspera, James, is how to, obviously File Fabric has, it's not just a file acceleration tool, but what are the kind of key differentiators in the file acceleration, I guess, between how you guys do it with MStream and how kind of those guys at kind of Signy and Aspera and those kind of companies handle it?
Sure, yeah, great question. So I mean, the primary difference, actually there's a few, to be honest. One, in a lot of scenarios, it can be clientless. So you can just do this straight in your browser without any additional plugins or extensions, or you don't have to have a plugin to receive it. You don't have to have a plugin to send it, so it can make the actual transaction very easy. Secondly, as well, quite often talk about, bandwidth and throughput. Those services will charge you sometimes for the storage that file is now sitting on. They'll also charge you often for the throughput of that service as well. So how much bandwidth you're using, how many files you're transferring, and things like that. Whereas the solution, it's once you buy the enterprise file fabric, that's covered under the umbrella of the license. We're not charging you for bandwidth, not charging you for the throughput you're using to move that file, because it's all on your infrastructure. It's moving through your data, moving through your storage, and going to your desired storage destination as well, not theirs, yours. And so, those would be probably some of the key things I would say there, Nick.
And I guess that not moving the data is something else that I guess we covered, but worth reinstating, that if we're just using the customer's storage, the data isn't going off to any cloud storage, cloud servers for processing or anything like that. Everything stays in place and it's agnostic, and you're not changing any file content or the file names. You're not encrypting. Everything kind of stays the same.
Absolutely. It's where you want it, it'll be, and no lock-in, no proprietization is the key thing there, regardless, whatever the feature as well.
I suppose I thought you mentioned the encryption just there, and I suppose I would like to say that the one feature that SME does allow is encrypting of specific folders. To give you an example of why this is quite useful is, say we have our local storage, which is mounted and accessible via local machines on the network. If you've encrypted a folder on SME, moved content in through the SME platform, any user who may try and access that folder through local storage will not be able to access the content whatsoever. So it is another layer of potential security if you did want to use it. We do use that quite extensively with our football department for moving secure content. Very good to know, Aliki. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, I think we could probably keep going on asking questions, but it's we've shot over our hour. So I guess, James, shall we wrap it up and obviously say a big thanks to Aliki for all of his time.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful to have you on the session, Aliki. Really insightful. I'm sure. I think the number of questions here for you is pretty testament to that. And of course, best of luck this season. If anybody needs it as well, there's some handouts as well. I'm sure there'll be some emails distributed as well afterwards with the recording if anybody else wants to play it back later. But yeah, thank you, Aliki. Thank you, Nick, and thanks.
Thank you guys for the opportunity. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Goodbye, everyone. Cheers. Bye.